Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, this video is all back in the Card Fight Vanguard deck profile. So if you guys enjoyed, don't like, comment, subscribe, and sorry. This time we're covering set 12 Solrairon for Keter Sanctuary. All around pretty interesting deck. Like, we got a few upgrades here and there. The deck can now call more consistently, get like the same amount of restand as before, but with its own dedicated support, and it can manage its resources just that slightly bit better. So any resource problems you have with the last build, they pretty much get fixed with this build. So let's get started, shall we? See what we got. First of the day, we have our starter in Stage of Horoscopy Solrairon, grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base, auto opponent for second draw card, standard starter. Not supposed about it, it's just a free draw if you win second. There's not much more I can say about it. None of the ride line really requires this, but hey, it's nice to go for the theme of it, so I might as well make Solrairon the starter. Then we have our Overtrigger and True Arbitrator Dragon of 100 Swords Duravassal. I just love saying that name and I don't know why. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Overtrigger, you might have Overtrigger in your deck. When revealed as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one of your units. It gets +1 million for the turn. And if you revealed it during draft check, activate its additional effect, which you can get until end of turn. You also perform draft checks for the battles your rear guard attacks. All around, pretty solid. Your rear guards have drive checks, and in a deck that kind of just gets numbers in general, being able to add trigger effects on top of those numbers is pretty solid as well. So Duravassal is a nice Overtrigger. You can use Armor Tino because they have the exact same effect, or you could use Volnut to guarantee more multi-attack, but the deck is almost always guaranteed to get 5 attacks, so yeah, you don't really need any other ways to multi-attack unless you're that like self-conscious of the fact that you maybe won't hit the 5th attack. So I like having Duravassal. If you want to run Volnut or Asphoria for resources and or more consistent multi-attack, go ahead, but I prefer the drive checks of Duravassal. Then we have our normal triggers. First, we run 2 copies of Protection Magic Proby, grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k base. Continues Guard Circle. If opponent's Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, it gets a 5k shield. It's nice to have the draw trigger, because there are going to be games where maybe you went too aggressive in the early entrance of the match, and then when you get to the late game, you're kind of wanting hand cards. So Proby kind of helps mitigate that. Also, you can technically stack triggers on top of your deck, so being able to stack with Proby and guarantee a draw is nice to have, but you don't want too many Probies because you want to focus on the offense. So 2 of Proby for that little bit of late game defense in case the game gets to the late game. Then we have, 2 Bard of Heavenly Song Outpacks, grades of boost, 15k shield, 4k base. Front trigger, again, you want to focus on the aggressive, but what I mean by aggressive is crit spamming, so you don't really need the front numbers too much, but it is appreciated to have them, so you do run them for that, a little bit of aggressiveness, and they both have the same skill, where it's Continuous Guard Circle. If your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater, they both get plus 5k shield, so a little bit extra guarding power, so in the early game, if you're getting rushed back, you can quickly throw that down, or again, if you're getting into the late game, those shields come in real handy. So it's nice to have 2 of both of them. Again, this is more for defensive purposes. This one does have a little bit of offensive detail to it, but it's mainly for endgame defensive type of purpose, Then we have our 3 crits in White Fang Witch Disma. It's not our only crit, just our 3 vanilla crit. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. You can really want any vanilla crit here because the other one's Blade Feather Dragon, so take that as you will, but it's nice having the extra crits here. Again, I say for pressure because you are technically guaranteed 4 attacks at least, and you're most likely going to hit 5 like every turn unless you brick or you misplayed or you ditched your multi-attack, and you get the point. So it's nice to have the crits there just to guarantee that everything past the Vanguard attack has the ability to pressure games. So 3 of Disma, and then we run 4 copies of Blade Feather Dragon, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger, auto rear, about this unit boosted, put this unit to soul to choose from me, 2k for the turn. I remember there was a match recently, actually, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with my friend who played Solrairon, and he ended up having no soul, because he didn't call Blade Feather to rear guard. He should have called Blade Feather to rear guard. I mean, I run Blade Feather anyways, but yeah, in a deck where the main Vanguard skill kind of requires soul, for me, it's always a general rule of thumb, just in case, run the effect crit because you don't know when you might need to use it. So, as a general rule of thumb, I run this as a 4 of. You don't need to call it most of the time, but it is just in case you get into that situation. So, 4 Blade Feather Dragon, nice for soul and help Solrairon, even if the 2k doesn't do much. Then we have our 4 heals and Circling Sorcerers. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. No effect heal standard, nothing special about it. I don't really like the effect heals too much. They are fluctuating 10 to 25k guard powers, and I'd rather have the consistent 15 over that. But if you want to run the effect heals, go ahead, but I prefer this one. Then move on to our grade 1s. First up, we have 3 copies of Divine Sister Dragokois. I don't know why every time I read that name, I expect, or Dakokois. I don't know why every time I read that name, I expect this thing to be half dragon mix. I don't know why. And here's good one boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard circle once per turn. When the other unit is placed by your card's ability, by card blasting 1, you can draw a card, and then that card was placed by the ability of your Vanguard with Solrairon in its card name, that place unit also gets plus 5k power. All around, pretty solid. There are multiple ways to place cards onto rearguard circles in this deck, so that's an easy free draw that you can get, but most of the time it's going to be placed by Solrairon, so it's an extra 5k. The downside is this does cost a little bit of CV to get resources, but hey, we have 2 different counter charges, we'll be fine. So 3 of Dak Koi's is just a very solid grade 1. It gets draws and possibly gives 5k to the unit that was called for multi-attack, so worst case scenario, if you have to boost with this on the first swing, the second thing is probably, thanks to Solrairon's ability and thanks to its ability, is probably going to be just enough numbers to hit the Vanguard anyways, unless they pull the trigger, so it's nice to have 3 of. Then we have 4 copies of our PG and Paladinium Zeo Dragon. Grade 1 boost, 0 6 base, contains Sentinel. You may have to force those in deck, almost put on guard circle. Choose one of your units, it cannot be hit till in the battle. And if your hand is 2 or more cards, choose a card from your hand, discard it. Standard PG, nothing special about it. Basically, that means if this and only one of the cards in your hand plus on guard circle, you don't have to discard one. It's great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, which is sometimes what I do with this deck. And then when late game rolls around, when you're running into a little bit of a hand problem, you can throw down the PG when they hit you with a big number, not have to discard something, and then you're just safe from the attack. So all around, it's very nice. It's all the defensive power you need in one single card, and it's nice to have. You can run Aegis Mire Dragon over this if you want to, because they have that kind of skill, but I prefer Paladinium Zeo Dragon just because it was close to release time of Solrairon. Then we have our last grade 1 of in the riot deck, 3 of in the main deck, because its skill is just good. Sage of Elixir, Solrairon. So grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, odd wound rolled upon by Sage of Robust Storagon. You may declare either a normal unit or trigger unit, and then reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed is a card type you declared, you may put it to your hand, and if you do not put it to your hand, put that revealed card into your soul or on the top of the deck. So the best part about this is, regardless if you get it wrong or right, it is an option to put it to the top of the deck or to soul. Regardless if you called it wrong or right, it is either going to the soul if you want it to, or going to top deck, and only when you declare right is it possible for it to go to hand. All around, that's pretty solid, because again, this deck can technically run into a soul problem, so being able to fix that on the first right, or technically the second right, is pretty solid, but also in the sense of you can just use this to stack a trigger and no one can really stop you. It's just nice to know. The only downside is they get to see the card because you reveal it, but I mean, if it's a trigger, they're probably going to take it anyway, so nice to have. And then auto, when it's placed on rearguard circle, if you have Vanguard Solrairon on this card name, choose up to 1 normal unit from your hand, reveal it, and you reveal the card, draw a card, and put that revealed card top of your deck. All around pretty solid. It's very nice for combo plays, combining this with like dependable Pierce Dragon and then the new grade 2 that allows us to get multi-attack consistently. Like all around, Solrairon is just a very solid grade 1. All of his skills are for free pretty much, and not to mention the fact that it just works really well in combos and it can be placed on rear guard during any point of the turn. So just nice card to have. 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the riot deck. The best part is too is if you call this during your opponent's turn, if you find a way to call it during your opponent's turn, that ability will work. Granted, you're losing a normal unit, but hey, on the bright side, you're getting a free draw, so you can swap a grade 3 for a possible PG. So just saying, very good grade 1, and we might want to find ways to call this during your opponent's turn just to abuse the hell out of its ability. And then we have 3 copies of our first grade 2, Magic of Alteration, Tunar, our first counter charger as well. Grade 2 is a 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear guard. At the end of battle, this unit attack while boosted. If your damage has 3 more face down cards, shove to soul counter charge 1. Basically, how this deck works, it works one of 2 ways. Either your opponent attempts to CB Starve you because they're worried about whatever, and in that case, you just, play bare minimum, just focus all your CB on Solrairon and maybe even the new grade 2, and that's it. Or your opponent puts you to higher damage because they're afraid of what you're going to do later on into the game, depending on how far the late game goes, and then you abuse all that CB in one go with Solrairon of that new grade 2, and then use Tunar to mitigate that cost, so you can do it again next turn. All around, Tunar is a very solid grade 2. It gets counter charge, it gets soul, therefore fixes both Solrairon's costs at once. So easy 3 of. There's not much more I can say about it. Just a very solid grade 2 that is seeable very often in this deck because deck stack and draw. The other ride line card can also, well, actually the other ride line card can't do anything, but Solrairon can deck stack, Dependable Dragon can deck stack, and just a bunch of cards can deck stack, so you're pretty much always guaranteed to see this one way or another. So 3 of 2 right now, just a very good grade 2. And then we have 3 copies of Academic of, I knew I forgot to change someone's name, and I knew these guy of all things. Academic of Verification, going off of this, or Verification, Pyric. So grade 2 and stuff, 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear guard when a normal unit is revealed by the ability of your Vanguard Solrairon on its card name. Until end of turn, this unit gets boost and 5k power. It's nice to have. This deck is pretty much on the lines of everything kind of works the way it wants to the point where I just kind of need anything that I want, really, and it's a booster, and it's a 15k booster at that, and worst case scenario, it's at least a 15k swinger. So all around, it's a nice card that you can put in the back row, flip over a normal unit from Solrairon's single ability, which if you don't see one, then sucks for you, but I mean, you're always guaranteed to stack one to top thanks to either this or Dependable Dragon. So, being able to be a 15k swing is nice to have, and not to mention the fact it's a booster, like I said. So easy, solid 3 up, good grade 2. There's not much more I can say about it. It just does its job really well. Then we have 4 copies of our new grade 2, who again makes the deck consistent in multi-attacking. The previous version I had of the deck could also multi-attack consistently. It's just what I mean by consistently here is not in the sense of how often you see the cards. I mean in like how much resources it takes up, because the previous way took a total of 3 CB, 2 for one of the cards that multi-attack, and then the last one for Solrairon. This one only takes up 2 CB, 1 for Solrairon, and then 1 for this thing. Anyways, Sagely Dragon, Wisdom Claw Dragon, Great Turn, set 5k shield, 10k base, auto placed on rearguard circle from the deck, I guess plus 5k power for the turn. Cool, so let's just go shove this in every Keter deck that calls for deck, and we're pretty much good. Hell, I should have shoved this in Bastion if it didn't bother me that I couldn't use the full effect. Anyways, free 5k if you call from deck, which is nice for Solrairon, and then auto is placed on rearguard circle. If you have Vanguard Solrairon as card name, by looking at the top card of your deck, you can put it to top or bottom. Then if you want to, so you can just stop there. If you just place it in general, regardless during the battle phase, main phase, regardless of by effects or not, regardless of where it's from, you get a free deck stack. There's no cost to it. You see, the downside to this one and Dependable Dragon, to some extent, is sometimes you might just have to forcefully put a card on top of the deck that you don't want to put on the top of your deck, but just to get a draw. This one, granted, you don't get a draw to it, but it's a free deck stack. So there's that. But then if you want to go further, by counterblasting 1, you can reveal the top card of your deck, and you may call it to an open rearguard circle if it's a unit card, and if you do not, you can put it to your soul. So either you just replace one of Solarian's cost for another, or you get a free rearguard to an open rearguard circle. This deck is really good at opening up the rearguard circles thanks to, I don't know, this thing and the other grade 2. However, the best part about this thing is, and I don't know why I thought it didn't work like this until I just read the card now, you can call it from its own skill. And none of its ability requires to be called by effects. Meaning, you know, you swing with Solrairon. Let's just say you have no open rearguard circles in the front row. You swing with Solrairon. You flip over a copy of this thing. Then you use this thing skill to get 5k. Stack the top card. Oh, you see a second copy of it. You CB1 to call the other copy to go from a rearguard circle. Gets another 5k. Stacks the deck. And then if you want to, if you have another open rearguard circle, CB1, call that extra card. Works like a charm. It does real well against board nuke decks. But again, I say I haven't tried that yet because I haven't needed to, and I have always thought that it didn't call itself because in my mind that made logical sense. But nope, it can call itself, and it can proc off the ability again, as long as you have CB. And again, that is a free deck stack one way or another. So 4 of Sagely Dragon, Wisdom Claw Dragon. Just very solid grade 2, does his job well, and allows the deck to get more multi-attacks and possibly come back from board nukes. Then we have our next grade 2. It's the last grade 2 in the deck, 1 of in the right deck, 3 of in the main deck, and that is Sage of Robust Strorgon. So grade 2 is a 5k shield, 10k base, auto when wrote upon by a unit with Solrairon in its card name. Choose a Sage of Elixir Solrairon from your soul and call that card and this card to rearguard circle. So cool, it can call itself and this thing, and because of how this thing skill works, again, it can be placed by any means to anywhere. That's a free deck stack for Solrairon skills, so you can guarantee your certain draws, or maybe, I don't know, proccing off Wisdom Claw, which is nice to have. And that's other ability, the ability that opens up rearguard circles, is auto rearguard. When a normal unit is revealed by the ability of your Vanguard Solrairon on its card name, this unit gets auto rearguard at the end of battle attack. Retire it to countercharge 1 until end of turn. So what sucks for me is typically the first time I use this, aka the turn I get to grade 3, is pretty much I have to sack this thing just to open up rearguard circles because he isn't restricted to the opponent being at grade 3, which is nice. But you know, so basically I have to waste a countercharge, but hey, that's why the extra 3 are there for. And again, I love how this deck works because it basically works like what's it called? Spike Brothers, where it's like charged to some extent, where you want to open up the rearguard circles after units attack and then call other units to Z open rearguard circles now to get more attacks out of it, because that's kind of how it works, honestly. Like, you know, you use Turan over here and this thing to basically nuke themselves and get CC, or you could also use Dependable Pierce Dragon to just get Soul, and then afterwards you swing with Solrairon, who again doesn't have to call to open rearguard circles, but then you call stuff like Wisdom Claw Dragon, and then use Wisdom Claw to get more rearguard attacks. So all around, it like works really solid with this deck. It helps out with the CB cost. Granted, it doesn't help out with the Soul Blast thing at all, but I mean, hey, it opens up rearguard circle to abuse this thing more often, and like I said, at least get CC out of it. So 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the right deck. The best part about this is there's no real way to CB starve this deck. This deck has enough ways to get CB back to the point where if you give them 1 damage at all, they can pretty much do everything they want to do. So, I mean, don't even try stopping them, really. So 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the right deck of this thing. And then we have our grade 3s. Run 4 copies of Dependable Pierce Dragon, grade 3, 10%, 13k base. Auto and placed on the rear guard circle. If you have a Vanguard Solrairon on its card name, jump to 1 normal unit from your hand, reveal it, and if you reveal a card, draw a card, and put that reveal card on top of the deck. So literally the exact same skill, word for word for this thing. But hey, you know, again, it's a free normal unit to put to top that you don't have to put, but if you want to put, you get a free swap with it, which is nice. So again, you can use to stack Wisdom Claw Dragon top of deck to abuse with Solrairon's ability. Or just stack a normal unit in general to, you know, abuse this ability so it can actually get its skill off. Then auto rear guard once per turn. When a normal unit is revealed by the ability of Vanguard Solrairon's card name, this unit gets auto rear guard. When it attacks, you may have it get plus 5k power on the battle, and if you do, place the unit to solve at the end of the battle until end of turn. All around, pretty solid because that is not a mandatory 5k. You can, because it's a May cost, so you can choose to give it 5k if you want to increase your soul and guarantee you get multi-attack off of this thing. Or, if you don't want to do that, which is a fair argument in of itself, you can just swing and not get that ability. Granted, there's no real reason to outside of like, I don't know, you want to keep rear guards because you know you don't have that good of a hand and you know your opponent doesn't play nuke cards, and in that case, I guess I can see the reason behind it. But in my opinion, it's always best just to, you know, because a guaranteed 23k swinger if you flip over a normal unit from this thing's ability, because presumably you stack the top card, which means you use Solrairon's ability to guess those normal unit and get 5k to your board, meaning gets a 23k swing, and then you get a soul charge out of it. So in my opinion, it's always worth using the skill, but I mean, I can also see a situation where it's not worth using it. Either way though, very solid, grade 3, it's an 18k, possibly 23k swinger, and can basically guarantee Solrairon's skill going off. So 4 of a Dependable Pierce Dragon. And then we have last card on the deck, 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the right deck of Great Sage of Heavenly Law, Solrairon. Grade 3 200 Persona, 13k base. Auto Vanguard circle at the beginning of your battle phase. By Soul Blasting 1, you declare either a normal unit or a trigger unit and reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card was the type you declared, this unit gets continuous Vanguard. All your units get plus 5k power to end of turn. Cool. So that's a free 5k to the entire board, including himself, which is nice. And again, it doesn't have to be a normal unit you declare, but most of the time, because of, I don't know, this thing maybe, and this thing, and hell, even maybe this thing, because again, this ability works in the main phase, you might just call a normal unit, who knows. And then his other ability, Auto Vanguard Circle, when this unit attacks into a Vanguard, by counterblasting 1, you get to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and choose 1 card from among them, call it to Rearguard Circle, or discard it, and then put the rest to top or bottom. Cool, it doesn't require to call it Open Rearguard Circle, so worst case scenario, if you can only kill 1 Rearguard, you can just call Wisdom Claw over that Rearguard, and then just counterblast 1 to call over the other Open Rearguard Circle. And then the other part about that is that neither of these 2 abilities require your opponent to be at a specific grade. Which means, because of how this entire deck works, if you're just paying attention as I quickly scroll through all these, none of these require the opponent to be at grade 3, or just for anything specific. I think the only requirements here are A, your Vanguard has to be Solarian. For this one, you have to have 3 or more face-down damage. For this one, you just need to flip over Norman, it's almost guaranteed half the time. And this one, you just need to have a Solarian. So, like, all in all, this deck can kind of just get going from first grade 3 turn while the opponent's at grade 2, meaning your entire board for the simple cost of a Soul Blast and probably bullshit combo spamming gets free 5k power, and then, you know, when he swings, regardless if you pull off combos with this thing or not, you get a free rear guard to board, and on top of that, you can put the other card, if you want to, back on the bottom of the deck if it's not a trigger or something that procs up from this thing's skill, and if you want to put it back to top because maybe it's a trigger or something that procs up this thing's skill, you can. So all around, Solrairon, very good grade 3. Free 5k to the whole board, which is guaranteed to go off on first grade 3 turn, thanks to this thing existing in combos with this. And then afterwards, sometimes you could hit or miss and not get the guess right. But I mean, again, you have a handful of cards that pretty much guarantee that you will always get a deck stack out of it. So, cool. Very solid grade 3. Gets rear guard calls out the wazoo, gets numbers, gets consistent multi-attacks, and it can do all this while your opponent's at grade 2. I have no complaints for any of this. It just does what it does, and it does it very damn well. That's for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, this deck is very fun to play. I remember when it first got released, I thought it was a little bit complicated, especially with all the text I had to read, but it was actually really simplistic. Like I said, none of it requires the opponent to be at grade 3, which is sometimes what I don't believe, so I always check the cards just to make sure. But hey, you get a free 5k to the whole board. That's something that Ezreal should have been able to do, honestly. But then also, it can get soul consistently with this guy and this one. It can get multi-attack consistently with this boy. Not to mention the fact it has a bunch of ways to get CC for free, pretty much. And it pretty much will always guarantee your stacks with either Elrond, Wisdom Claw, or Dependable Pierce Dragon. And not to mention, you have draw power in this card. All around, the deck works. It just does its job well, and there's not much more I can say about it. So without further ado, I'm going to end this one here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join us, go to follow Twitch. I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to set up your Vanguards.